finally got quite a few rounds downrange with the CZ Shadow 2, and then I figured it would be a good idea to compare it to the CZ Shadow 1 and see what the differences really are between version 1 and version 2. So yeah, the Shadow 2 versus the Shadow 1. Now, I couldn't find any pricing on these. These are discontinued. If you know what the going rate of these are used, let me know, guys, down in the comment section, because it's kind of hard to compare these not knowing the prices. But I will say this one, I got this one for a stupid good price. I got this one for around $1,200. It was a little over $1,200. You can find them for that sometimes, but most of the time they're $1,500 to $1,700, just depending on which model you get. And if you want to know more about the models of the Shadow 2 that are available, check out this video right up here, and then you can watch that after this video. And that way you'll know a little bit more about the different Shadow 2 models. Also, for those of you who are new to this channel, very first link in the video description or that link that's pinned in the comments, and you'll be able to find links for all my favorite gear and stuff like that, and hopefully everything's on sale. So my buddy Steve from Mr. Big Kid channel let me borrow his CZ Shadow 1. I'll throw a link to his channel down in the video description if that's something you want to check out. And we both went to the range a couple of weeks ago, and we were just getting footage for videos that we needed. Big shout out to Ted's Shooting Range in Queen Creek for allowing us to shut down one of the bays so that we could film. That was really nice of them. So if you are in that area, go check them out. They're pretty cool people. Now, one thing that I'm going to tell you is I didn't expect there to be such a huge difference between the Shadow 2 and the Shadow 1. It really just shocked me. I just was blown away at the difference in the way they shoot. Now, the CZ Shadow 1 is obviously discontinued. This gun, I can't find a whole lot of information on it. Every time I try looking it up, this is actually considered the SP01 Shadow, and every time I look it up, I just find information about the SP01 Shadow Target, which is quite a bit different, has different sights and stuff, and a different hammer. This one is essentially an SP01 Tactical with just a couple of differences. One of the biggest differences between the Shadow line of pistols versus just the standard SP01, P01 line of pistols is the lack of a firing pin block. So for example, on this P01, you can see that little roll pin right here. That is our firing pin block. And by redesigning the trigger to not have that, CZ is able to make way better triggers. And so you can see here, this one does not have one, whereas a CZ75 Tactical would. So that's one big difference in it. So that's probably the biggest difference between this and the SP01 Tactical. And then you get different sights, you get a different hammer, you get a different magazine release with this one as well. Now, I'm going to take the lights off of these for the rest of the video, just so we can get a better look at these. So the CZ Shadow 1 comes in at 41 ounces. It also has a 17+1 round capacity for 9mm, has a full rail. Well, it has 3 slots for a rail, which for this could be considered a full rail. It has a double action trigger pull weight of around 10 to 11 pounds, whereas the single action weight is about 3.5 pounds. It does come with, I guess you could say, non-adjustable fiber optic sights. You got, I'm sure it comes with red. This one has a green tube in it. And then you have these squared off rear sights, which we'll go over the differences here in a minute. But they're non-adjustable. I mean, I guess you could adjust them by tapping them with a hammer, but they're not easy to adjust. This one comes with the rubber palm swells, which I'm just not a fan of palm swells in general. And then the rubber ones, they just don't work well for my hands, but that's not really a con because everybody's hands are different. This is more like the Tactical hammer. And then it has a little bit of serrations here and a few serrations right here. Overall, it's kind of hard to rack, you know, trying to grab these tiny little serrations. And then the trigger is obviously curved, and it does have an adjustable over travel stop. Now on the CZ Shadow 2, there's quite a few differences. Number one, this is a heavier gun. Not only is it heavier, but the weight is redistributed across of it, but this comes in at 46.5 ounces. So this one is 5.5 ounces heavier than this one. Not only that, but you'll notice here at the front, it only has 1 slot for a light, and they've also added more weight up here at the front. So for example, the center of gravity on this is approximately Yep, it's approximately right here. The center of gravity on this guy, I can't even find the center of gravity on it, honestly. It just wants to wobble back and forth. This one has a larger mag release here that is adjustable if you want to change the angle of it, or if you want to swap it out for an aftermarket one or one with a different color. The double action trigger on this one also comes in at about 10 to 11 pounds, and the single action on this one comes in at about 3.2 pounds, about 0.2 pounds lighter than the Shadow 1. The sights on here are also fiber optic, but you can see they are a little bit lower profile in the rear, and these are easily adjustable with a screw right there. This one doesn't come with any rubber grips or palm swell grips. It comes with thin aluminum grips that are very well textured. It comes with front serrations and rear serrations back here, and then you have a curved trigger that has adjustable over travel stop. The first and biggest difference I noticed is the profiling of the grip. Now, to make this a little easier, they both have the 1911 style grip profile, but you'll notice on the Shadow 2 right here, it's more angular. And this one has more of a swooping action. This one has far superior checkering right here on the front strap, and then also back here on the rear. Whereas this one has just a teeny bit on the back and an even smaller amount on the front. The trigger guard on this one is also rounded, and this trigger guard a lot flatter. And what I've noticed is with this is when I'm pressing out to shoot, I can hook this hand up under this and hang on to the gun just a little bit better than I can with this one, with that being curved right there. Obviously the rear sights are different like we showed earlier, but not only that, the serrations are much different. The serrations on the Shadow 2 are so much better. It's a lot easier to grab these serrations. So if you wanted to grab the front and do a press check, or if you wanted to grab the rear to rack it, doesn't really matter. It's so much easier. They just grab your fingers. We already covered the mag release, how that one's different. Word of caution, this is Loctited into place. So you're gonna need to take a soldering iron to stick it down into that screw head to heat it up before you try breaking it loose. If you don't, you're gonna strip out that screw. I almost did. We kind of already touched on it, but the grips are much different. These grips are way sexier, way grippier, and I find that they're way more comfortable, in my hands. Another thing that's different is their rails. We got one slot on the Shadow 2, we got three slots on the Shadow 1. And so, that's not the biggest deal, but it might limit your light options if you want to throw a light on here. I don't know. All of my lights that are for full-size guns seem to fit them with no problems, but you might run into that. The hammer is obviously different. This one has a flat hammer right here. And as I kind of showed you earlier, this one's more similar to the SP01 Tactical. It's all rounded off. Now, I can't tell if the trigger assembly is really very different. I didn't take this one apart. I've taken this one apart numerous times. But when I took the slide off and looked down in there, the biggest difference that I've seen is there is a spring that's in a different place on this one than it is on the Shadow 2. And I'm assuming that makes a difference. Another thing that I've noticed is the takedown lever here really protrudes out on this side, making it a little bit easier to take down, whereas this one doesn't quite protrude as much and makes it a little bit more difficult to take out, but that might be a benefit so that you don't hit it with your finger when you're actually firing it. All those differences are great, but how does it actually translate at the gun range? So when we were at the range, I had quite a few guns to test, but with the CZ Shadow 2, this was my first experience actually with either one of these guns. This one, I put approximately 100 rounds through it. We're not done with it yet, and this is not the full review. Man, holy cow, this thing surprised the living crap out of me. All right, first rounds through the CZ Shadow 2. This thing runs like a scalded dog. I was able to get 100 rounds of just all kinds of different types of ammo through it. Some of it was lower end ammo, some of it was nicer ammo, some of it was steel cased ammo, and some of it was brass. And it cycled every single thing that I fed it. And so that's awesome, 100 rounds, no malfunctions. It's a super soft shooting gun, and it comes right back down onto target after recoiling super quickly. The other thing that I noticed about this, and I haven't shot this outdoors yet because it's incredibly too hot here for that. My camera's just shut off after like 98 degrees. I didn't experience any slippage with this. I had predicted in the last video that I predicted some slippage with these, and so far, no slippage, but we are gonna swap them out and just try other grips here in the near future. The trigger is obviously phenomenal. Most double action triggers are phenomenal. It was very light. However, it was very predictable. It never like shocked me. Like when, for example, if I had it here and I'm prepping the trigger, there is a pronounced wall so that I don't just accidentally pull through that wall. And I'm able to pull this trigger without disrupting the front sights. I found that to be very satisfying. Now, I shot this gun first, and then my buddy Steve pulled this guy out. I loaded up a couple of mags. I only did about 50 rounds through this gun. I really knew what I needed to know after basically the first magazine. The differences in the way that these two feel when shooting is kind of like the difference between a Civic Si versus a Civic Type R. There are a world of differences. This one doesn't have all the extra weight at the front. And so when I shot this, and when I first pressed out to shoot this, I was expecting the recoil impulse of the Shadow 2. After shooting that one, this one felt really snappy. Not that this is a snappy gun, it's just that's the way it felt. Okay, right away, tons more recoil. Crazy how much less recoil that gun has, but interesting, let's keep going.
Doesn't jump at all. This thing is like...
Even with the light off of it, it's the same.
Oh man.
I don't know how this comes out on camera. Sometimes I've had guns that shoot really soft, and then when I put the slow motion footage by a gun that doesn't, you know, when you're watching the recoil impulse on these, sometimes what you feel doesn't translate into the video. And I just want to make that very clear. But here is the slow motion footage of these two guns side by side running the same type of ammo. Now, like I said, I don't know how that translates, but it was a huge difference. Even my buddy Steve could not believe how well balanced and how flat that this gun shot. The other difference I noticed was obviously the sight picture. You know, with these big blocky rear sights, they cover up a lot more of the target. And so there's more of a guessing game when you're presenting this over your target and trying to gain your sight picture. Whereas with this one, because those edges are chamfered, you get to see more of your target versus just looking at the rear sights. And I think that was a very good decision on CZ's part on installing those. Now this one also ran like a champ, zero malfunctions with this one as well. However, I did experience some grip slippage with this rubberized palm swells. They just don't fit my hand well. I'm not gonna say that this is a bad thing or a good thing, because some people love the rubber palm swells. But for me, I did notice a little bit. I wanted to readjust my grip a few times. I don't think I actually did. And that, in combination with the rounded trigger guard that's kind of harder to grab, made for just a less confidence-inspiring grip on the gun. Although this trigger pulls at about 0.3 pounds heavier than the Shadow 2, I didn't really notice a difference in the trigger pull. Something I've noticed about both of these guns are marketed as double action, single action guns. You can also get the Shadow 2 in some single action only variants, or you can convert your double action, single action to be single action only. Now, as I was at the range and this is just something I didn't think about while I was there. I was really wanting to test out the double action pull. But because I was kind of in a hurry, I was thinking about filming and I was thinking about getting other stuff done, I didn't realize how impractical double action is without a decocker. So this gun's unloaded, hammers forward. You know, when you put the magazine in, I'll reload some dummy rounds. All right, when you let it go, well, your hammer's already back. And so I just wasn't even thinking about it. I just pressed out and started shooting it. There's only one or two ways that you can lower this hammer without making it go bang. One way is to just put your finger here, pull the trigger, and let that roll home very slowly. Now, that's a little sketchy, especially if there's a live round in the chamber. I know here in Arizona, although we are one of the most free states when it comes to firearms. I mean, I guess you could argue Texas is now because they're gonna allow suppressors with no tax stamps. But for most of history, we've been one of the most free states. If you have a negligent discharge in this state, and let's just say you live somewhere where you have neighbors and they call the police, you automatically get a felony and lose your gun rights. Now, the cool thing about our state is if your felony isn't violence or sexual in nature, you get your gun rights restored within 2 years, given that you haven't gotten any more trouble. So that's a good thing, but still, knowing that I have neighbors, even though I point the gun in a safe direction, if I have a negligent discharge and someone calls the cops, there goes not only my gun rights for 2 years, but also this is my career, guys. Like, this is what I do for a living. I make videos about guns. So that's not very confidence inspiring doing that. I mean, obviously you could hold it here, you know, and release it like that. To me, I would just get a little bit worried that I would slip and have a negligent discharge. Now, I don't know if there is a decocker available for the shadow triggers. I think that might be only for these types of guns that have that trigger block pin. But in the last video, I'm wanting to set this thing up to be either a home defense weapon, which it most probably will, but I also wanted to test it and see how it would feel to conceal carry with it. And I actually just got a holster for this gun, and we're gonna talk about that in probably next week's video or the week after that. I got a whole separate video for that holster. And if I did carry this, or if I did use this as a nightstand gun, I mean, obviously I don't want this hammer back. I mean, for one thing, you know, if there's no holster, obviously I want this hammer forward. If it's a home defense gun, you know, obviously you can't predict how you're gonna react unless you've been through that before, like a home invasion or a break-in or something like that. And I would hate to pull this in, you know, and being scared, my fingers slip and hit that double action trigger. You know, obviously loading it to put it and then putting it into single action mode is a whole nother story entirely. It's like kind of induces anxiety. And obviously if I was carrying this gun, I'd want it in double action mode also. Not a big deal, but is something that I didn't think about in the last video that I wanted to bring up now. Now, I wanted to answer two questions. One question I want to answer is, knowing what I know about this gun now, after I fired it, did it meet, exceed, or hit below my expectations that I set forth in the first video? And then the other question I want to answer is it worth the upgrade if you have a CZ Shadow 1? So in the last video, I predicted that this would be a very soft shooting gun. I predicted that the grips would probably start slipping if my hands were sweaty. I was a little sweaty at this indoor range, but my hands didn't slip. Now, I haven't been outside in the extreme heat or anything, so I can't tell you about that, but I was actually surprised to see that my hands weren't slipping. The sight alignment and everything was spot on, and it was more accurate than I can be. And I will say this, it really held up to the reputation and for the expectations that I set forth on it. Now, if you already have a CZ Shadow 1, I can't really find a lot of prices on these. These are actually kind of hard to find. An SPO1 Tactical is about $800. I'm guessing if you found one of these, it might be the same price. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments section. I would say it'd probably be closer to $1,000, if not more, because the SPO1 Shadow targets are like $1,700. This one, I was able to get it for $1,200. Or let's assume that this gun's $200 less than this one. This one is honestly so much better to shoot. And especially because if you're the kind of person buying one of these guns, you probably want to get into competition. This is going to get back on target quicker. This one's going to be softer shooting. And this one's going to feel much better in your hand because of the reprofiled grip. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think. It matters what you guys think. Let me know. Have you guys shot both of these or one or the other? I will say this. One thing I will say is Steve from Mr. Big Kid told me that everyone that shoots his gun can't believe how soft shooting it is. Once he shot this one, his mind was blown. So take that as you will. But anyway, I got a lot more video content coming on this one. I got a new AR pistol build coming up that you definitely don't want to miss. And I got more stuff coming with the AREX Zero, and I got like 4 new guns coming in that we're gonna make videos on that I'm not gonna talk about right now. So if you're not subscribed, hit the little subscribe button, play ding dong ditch with the like button. But until next time, guys, I love you. You guys stay sexy.